Hello there. One day people will wake up and realise that successive governments have put in place mechanisms that force permanent mass immigration on us. It doesn't matter whether you vote Tory, Labour, Lib Dem or Green. The die is cast. Net inward migration will have to keep increasing to keep the UK Ponzi scheme afloat. Yes, increasing. As our UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has just proved. And it's not just to help the corporates generate huge profits, it's actually a measure of how badly the government has handled the economy. And the situation would be exactly the same, Brexit or no Brexit. Because the country is not productive enough to pay the people enough to allow them to live the life they want to live, as well as collect sufficient taxes to pay for the public services that the public demands. That's it. So the only way to plug that gap is for the government to borrow ever more money. That's it. But the government cannot borrow an infinite amount of money because the interest payments would also end up being infinite. Now, the measure it uses for borrowing is the debt to GDP ratio, and that works exactly like a loan or a mortgage. Want to buy a 250,000 quid house on an 80% mortgage? Then the bank will check your earnings and borrowings to make sure you can afford to pay that mortgage off. And in government terms, a 100% debt to GDP ratio, where total net debt equals total UK income for the year, is a threshold governments do all they can to not cross. So what they do is try to boost GDP to allow them to borrow more money. It's that simple. And the easiest way to boost overall GDP is to increase the size of the population. More people, more food bought and consumed, more people working, more people paying tax. House prices are forced to go up to make house building more attractive. All GDP boosting stuff. But, and here's the big but, this does not increase our productivity per head. Oh yes, as a country we produce more stuff to be consumed by more people, but the underlying maths of whether we are productive enough to both pay the people enough to live the life they want to lead and pay the taxes for the public services they demand has not gone away. Governments try to fool us into thinking they're on the right track, but they are not. We cannot afford to continue down this path. So we end up needing to borrow even more to service these new people we've taken in. But now there are more people in the country, so we have to borrow even more this year than last year because productivity is stagnant. That means we have to boost GDP by a bigger number than last year, meaning we have to import more people next year than this year. You get the picture. It's a Ponzi scheme. And they always crash and burn in the end. And Rishi Sunak has reportedly watered down his plans to raise the legal immigration salary threshold because, according to the Office for Budget Responsibility, limiting immigration now would mean there would be less headroom to pay for tax cuts in the run-up to the next general election. In reality, less headroom to borrow more money to pay for tax cuts. The simple truth is that everyone in the country needs to work harder and smarter if they want to see true prosperity. The route to personal prosperity is through improved personal productivity. But we now see that improved personal productivity is viewed as a legitimate target for vastly increased taxation. So why work harder and smarter just to be forced to hand over more of your wealth to a feckless government so that the lazy can benefit from generous benefits at your expense? No, increased productivity is now a distant pipe dream. It sounds too much like austerity and hard work to most people. especially the unions. And Labour won't want any of that. Far easier to keep importing people and finding ways to tax harder. To improve our lot, we need increased workplace training and modernisation. And I don't mean training of the woke variety either. Increased workplace training and modernisation will lead to better performances and lead to improved wealth all around. But the unions and some lazy workers label it as some sort of exploitation of the worker. No, they want the improved pay and conditions without the modernisation and without the increased income for their employers that could fund better pay. And we're now in a situation where the entire UK economy is relying on filling the country with an ever-increasing number of newcomers every single year. It's hard-wired in. And all that happens is that the government has to borrow ever more money and import ever more people to keep UK PLC afloat. Importing more and more people is not a viable solution. It is a short-run sugar rush. Unless productivity per head increases, this situation will spiral very quickly out of control and destroy us, both in economic and in heritage terms. Just look around you. We have the largest ever population in our history, all supposedly working and paying taxes. But we can't cobble a proper set of armed forces together. We have a joke of a police service, our courts and prisons are collapsing while we pour endless billions and trillions into a thoroughly dysfunctional NHS. And we're funding reams of pointless woke pen pushers into the bargain. Bank closures, public services like rubbish collections being reduced. And now we hear that due to a lack of in-house expertise, the government will soon be announcing a scaling back in our nuclear energy ambitions, despite all those uni grads and postgrads. Sounds like it's going the way of heat pumps and electric cars. In short, the UK is not working, and what work it is doing is not paying enough for those lifestyles we think we, as individuals, deserve to enjoy. Not helped by the fact that employers are now no longer allowed to hire and promote the best person for the job. No, they have to hire and promote the person that most fits the woke tick-box exercise. That stifles productivity and stifles the ambitions of the largest demographic in the country, especially amongst the males. We are also not allowed to use the most efficient forms of fuel to generate the power that runs the country. No, net zero now ensures we use the least efficient and most expensive forms of energy we can find. We have been setting ourselves up to fail for decades, and we are now failing spectacularly. All because the government has failed to grasp the nettle and tear it out of the ground by demanding employers, both public and private, prioritise increased productivity per head and hire the best people for the job. Now, a good way to get this started would be to put in place a requirement that the UK government cannot spend more than it makes in tax during any 10-year period. And if it borrows money now, it must have a firm plan to ensure that loan gets repaid over the next 10 years in full. And further, that it binds the next government after any election. All with regularly published figures to show us whether or not the current government and the country is living within its means. If you want more services, then we pay more taxes immediately. No hiding behind huge debts racked up now for future generations to be forced to pay off. Don't want to be caught out by a future pandemic or war? Then fund the relevant services properly today. The days of something for nothing are fast coming to a close, because those days of something for nothing are built on a huge Ponzi scheme that is about to come crashing down around our ears.